Now let me introduce Archer and Margot. Archer is the author of the highly acclaimed Vermont-based series featuring Detective Joe Gunther, which the Chicago Tribune describes as the best police procedurals being written in America. He is a past winner of the New England Independent Booksellers Association Award for Best Fiction, the first time a writer of crime literature has been so honored. In 2011, Mayer's 22nd Joe Gunther novel, Tag Man, earned a place on the New York Times bestseller list for hardback fiction. Archer Mayer is currently a death investigator for Vermont's Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Over the past 30 years, he has also been a detective for the Windham County Sheriff's Office, a volunteer firefighter, EMT, the publisher of his own backlist, and a frequent contributor to magazines and newspapers. His critically acclaimed series of police novels featured Lieutenant Joe Gunther of the Brattleboro, Vermont Police Department. These books, which have been appearing about once a year since 1988 and have been published in 5 languages, if you count British, and routinely gather high praise from such sources as the New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, New Yorker, and others, often appearing on their 10 best yearly lists. Whereas many writers base their books only on interviews and scholarly research, Mayer's novels are based on actual experience in the field. The result adds a depth, detail, and veracity to his characters and their tribulations that has led the New York Times to call him the boss man on procedures. I love that. Marked Man is his latest Joe Gunther book and the 32nd in the series. Margot Zalkind Mayer, who is the Director of Marketing, New Projects, and Publicity, has worked in advertising, marketing, and design in New York, Boston, and Vermont. In New York, she worked for an international agency creating print ads and broadcast. In Vermont, she ran an advertising agency working on everything from national media planning to putting the bumper stickers on cars. She writes, designs, and has produced television commercials and documentary films, and has won several awards for her work. Margot has taught design and communication at the Cooper Union School for Art and Architecture, the School of Visual Arts in New York, and at UVM. Archer and Margot, thanks so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
So Margot and I drew straws, and obviously I won because I'm shooting my mouth off first. But we're going to sort of do a pseudo division of labor, although we obviously work closely together on all this stuff. But since I got the ball started rolling in the 1980s, I was on my own at that point in this endeavor. So I thought I'd bore you with only 2 or 3 hours explanation of that process. And then we could segue. You have, supplied a list of questions. And I thought I might, in addition, sort of touch on those. But this is going to be very rapid fire because in a funny kind of way, I'm really only going to do this for about 10 minutes and then hand it over to Margot, and then we'll commingle together once she explains a little bit of her side of the operations, because we really work as a two-headed hydra on this. I write the trash and she publicizes it. That's the idea. I wish it were trash because then we'd both be multimillionaires, but in fact, the bloody good reviews are screwing me up. If you know anyone who really hates people like me, go let them know. Anyhow, long story short, 1988, I'm doing like everybody else does. I've got a foolish idea in my head. I pull over in those days a typewriter. I do an exercise in typing. Out comes a book, perfectly awful. It's rejected by everybody. I do it again. I do it a third time, do it a fourth time. Well, finally, something comes out in 88, and that's Joe Gunther #1. I get picked up by the long-suffering agent who hands it over to a publisher, which would then Putnam's. And with the passage of time, I don't have to do anything more than that. I never switched off from that agent, and the publishers merely passed me along from entity to entity. Publishers are fluky creatures, at least in those days, and they would go out of business or they would acquire each other or God knows what they would do. But occasionally I'd wake up, roll out of bed and realize that I had a different publisher, but I never played any role in that. So I've maybe had 5 publishers, and it's sometimes I didn't even know who the hell they were, but they were publishing the books and paying me advances. So on that, I occupy a very unreal world compared to what most people occupy. I had a 9-to-5 job. I wrote books under contract, and other than the very first Joe Gunther, I've never hustled for a book again. They just every year or every 3 years, so 3-year, 3-book contracts, they would offer me another deal. So instructionally, I'm probably one of the most useless people you're going to hear during this entire symposium of all the various writers. That being said, the other thing that I was exquisitely aware of was the fact that I was a business person, and that these books represented a product and that I needed to keep them in print. Because the other thing that publishers traditionally used to do was they gave you a 1-minute, 1-mile warranty. They would publish you in hardback and paperback. Then they would get bored and they would put you out of print. So at some point, about 15, 18 books into this, I turned to them and said, well, if you're just going to put them out of print and throw them out, why don't you just give them back to me? I'll publish them on my own. You keep publishing the hardbacks and we will complement each other. And I'll take on the risk, and that'll be out of your hair. So that's what we did. Of course, what they didn't know, and I did know, because I was reading the trades, was that ebooks were right around the corner. So they gave up all the rights to books that now they absolutely do not give up rights to. That kept me alive and well. And so all my books are still available. So if someone says, well, I'm not going to buy one of your cheesy hardbacks at $30 a pop, what do you think? I'm nuts. I'm a New Englander. What do you got that's cheap in paper? I can say, well, that's okay. And of course, a good part of that is what Margot, when we got together, ended up turning around and improving and making a national entity. And I'll let her fill you all in on that, because I was just doing a out of the back pocket local thing with a local warehouse full of books. A lot of this predated electronics, I barely had inside plumbing. So that's, because I go back so far. Now, I guess I'll very quickly touch on this, because a lot of these answers are going to come during the Q&A. So I'm not going to worry about not touching all the highlights. We'll get to that. But there were some questions here: once written or mostly written, what's next? We'll get to that. I'll skip that right now. Critical readers, that all you burgeoning writers need to have at least 2 of them, not a close relation or someone involved in the content of the book. I absolutely disagree with that. They said they need to be paid either in cash or in syrup. Very amusing, also inaccurate. Yes, they can be. What you're looking for are honest people, not whether you're related to them or not, or sleeping with them or not. What you need to do is go for their intellectual independence. If they are brave enough to tell you that your stuff is trash and could be fixed up by this little detail or that little detail, that's who you want to talk with. It doesn't matter if they're your mother or not. So I think those kind of rules, they make you sound very authoritative, but I think they're crap. That's just my personal opinion, of course. The inevitable rewrites and disciplines to revisit your manuscript goes without saying. You don't write a book, you rewrite a book, and you rewrite it again and again and again and again. And if you're not, you're an idiot and you deserve to be rejected. I have no opinions on any of these things, by the way.
Clearly,
So,
yes, clearly.
a literary editor to give you feedback on the flow, structure, character development. Yeah, well, we're sort of circling the same hydrant there. So that all ties in. Copy editor, catch all the spelling and punctuation areas. Same thing. but the idea that you necessarily have to find professionals, quote unquote, and that you need to pay them is nonsense. I, for example, married mine. Okay, now, yes, I do pay her, but in kind, I'd like to think. Finding a publisher, whether national, Vermont-based, hybrid, or self-publishing, that's of course gone crazy. So you can do that with far more flexibility than I did in the old days. You might do it with less success because they're all competing now. And in the old days, it was simple. You had one of 5 major publishing houses in the United States who owned all these other imprints that you thought were independents but weren't. And they either gave you thumbs up or thumbs down. And if it was thumbs down, you were out of luck. Now, if you're out of luck, it means you don't know how to plug in your Xerox machine, because anybody can get to publish. And then the final thing on the sheet of paper that you guys sent me was the crucial element of luck. No kidding. Absolutely true. Yeah, we beat our heads against the wall and go, well, Margot says this all the time. I don't say this about myself, but she will point out, my God, your writing is so much better than so-and-so who's now being driven around by 3 chauffeurs. Well, who knows what dictates taste and financial appeal and all the rest of it. I have the best reviews that Stephen King would kill for, except he's too busy counting his money. So he doesn't care. So that part, if you worry too much and concentrate too much about that, if you write for anyone other than yourself, you're in trouble. I'm done. It's up to her.
I'm wondering if it's all right if I break the format a little bit, because before I talk about all the stages of publishing and publicity and everything else, I'd like to know what you hope to get from this as participants. Are you all mystery writers already? Do you have a book? Do you want to get into writing? Can you just let us know that? And then I'll talk about how I got into all this and what I do.
We'll do that, Margot. And so it's not cacophonous. I'm going to go back to the, not that one. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to call on people, and you can speak if you want and don't if you don't. Let's see.
Okay.
I'm going to go here. So as I see you on my list, Joseph, would you like to speak?
My name is Joe Slocum. I'm calling from Castine, Maine. I was a lawyer in a government official for 40 years.
Joe, I'm going to jump in. Your video and your voice is breaking up.
Published is about
now I may have completely broken it. Maybe if you shut your video off, it might be clearer. That is, we'll get your audio. We won't. Yeah, try that.
Is that better?
Go ahead. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've written a couple of novels, and in my novels there is mystery, but they are not necessarily spy novels or police novels or detective novels. But the mystery in my books is about the characters and who they really are and what are the secret forces that affect their lives. The one I'm trying to publish takes place at the Veterans Hospital in White River Junction, and it involves psych patients who are confined, who convince their distraught psychiatrist that he must search for a fictitious character, and if he does so, they'll work with him more.
Okay, have you been published?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Joe?
That's all I wanted
No.
to.
Okay. I'm going to go down the list here. Chris, you want to speak?
I'll speak, but I'm not a mystery writer. I'm an avid mystery reader. And I actually, I'm here because I had the idea for this series, which Bob jumped on. But I just thought that adding a mystery writer in with our fiction and our poetry and our children's books writers, that it was a good way to sort of broaden the group of the types of manuscripts that people might be thinking of. So no, I'm here really because I've watched all the others. Actually, I missed the children's one, and I'll be there for Rachel's. And I'm trying to just gauge how much interest there is, and whether people
What do you do next year?
well, what we're going to do next year, I don't know. You know, I think that this is the first time around, and I was just delighted to have Archer come, even though he's not a Kingdom resident. He's the only non-Kingdom resident that we asked for this series, because I happen to have met Archer several times. So thank you for being here. But that's my interest is in organizing the group of people rather than the writing of this anything.
Thank you. Okay.
Ellen, would you like to speak?
Talking to me?
Yes. Yes, I am. Thank you. Hello.
Well, hi. Yes. I signed up for this just because I was curious as to why did I sign up for this? Really, I'm interested in mystery writing and police procedurals because I would like to kill a lot of people without getting arrested. That's really what drives me in this. My career was as a journalist, and I did spend a fair amount of time as a police reporter.
Oh.
So I guess what my question would really be how, I'd love to hear more about how much your experience as a professional in police work or whatever it is you do, because I don't know. I have read your books, but I'm curious as to how much of your professional life has bled into your writing. That's really what I'm interested in. I'm working on a number of projects, but nothing it's worth talking about here. So that's my curiosity. So I just thought it would be cool, and I thought it would be interesting to hear what you had to say, because I have read your books, which are available at the Peachum Library, which is where I live. So that's my question.
Thank you.
When it comes up,
Revenge without prison time. That's really all about. It's all about. So thank you.
I'll answer that a little bit later when it plugs in, but just remind me.
Okay, shall do.
Okay, I'm skipping Marianne because she sent me a note and said she's happy to be here, but does not have a question, at least at this point. So I'm going to Mark Travis. Mark, would you like to speak?
Sure. Hi, I live in central New Hampshire. I am was also a journalist, newspaper journalist for a long time. Support myself now largely by ghostwriting books as a freelancer for a Texas company. I'm working on my 9th. I've been published on my own before as a co-author of a nonfiction book published by UPNE, which no longer exists. I have written one novel, a mystery novel set right after the Civil War, an area in Concord, New Hampshire, near where I live. Got an agent who shopped it and succeeded in accumulating a long list of rejections and some good feedback in trying to address it. I pretty much messed it up. And it took years and an illness before I thought my way through, I think, the problems I'd created. And at that point, self-published it because I just didn't want to go through the whole months of rigmarole again. And have now finished a first draft of a second mystery / historical fiction set in Concord during the Civil War. And am interested in learning about strategies for upping my odds of winning the lottery of getting, a work of fiction published with the kind of track record I have, which is, mixed.
Okay, thank you.
And Whitney, would you like to speak?
Hi, I'm Whitney. I currently live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, so saying hello from far away, but I am not published. I'm a lawyer by day, so I have written a lot of very dry articles for law journals that have been published, but no fiction yet. But I do have a manuscript that I'm working on, and I guess my question would be, it's a mystery featuring a journalist as the main character, and I've been working on it, putting it away, working on it, putting it away. And so I would wonder, when do you feel like you're done revising and you should start, sending it out to people, or, what's that tipping point, do you feel? Because you can revise forever.
Well, thank you all. I was going to speak about the other side of this, which is the marketing and the publishing. Archer and I got together some years ago, and I come, as you heard, from advertising and marketing. And one of my first surprises when Archer and I first started to talk about this industry, I had this assumption that when you have a publisher, especially a big deal New York publisher, that they just bend over backwards to publicize you and create events and practically show up with a limo at your door to take you around and do all these wonderful events. And after he stopped laughing, we started to talk about what it's really like. And they don't do very much. I guess to Archer's point, if you are Stephen King, they do a lot. But it confused me, because if you have the everybody else category, including new and upcoming writers, which Archer was at one time, then why wouldn't you promote them and do a lot and run the full page ads for them instead of for Stephen King, who everybody already knows? Well, I never got the answer to that. And so I realized that we needed to do a lot ourselves, which Archer already did. And as he told you, it was in a different time. And so there weren't so much computer messages that were sent out at the time, if any, right? And
No.
so I jumped in and we started to do Facebook, which Archer really hates. But we do it a lot because it's sort of an invasion of privacy in a funny way. So I try to do that balance of telling people things about what's going on and engaging them, and and the new book's coming out, so you want that balance. And then we worked on a website, which he had one, but we tried to make it more interactive. And then we kept an ear to the ground on what was going on. And as Archer mentioned, we got into ebooks, which was a real godsend at the beginning, because at first it was just like a skyrocketing industry. So that was terrific, but now it's sort of plateaued out a lot more. But constantly, I have tried to figure out how to get books out there. One of the things we did, Archer used to get books printed in batches, sent to a warehouse, and the warehouse person distributed the books. So then we spoke with the New York publisher, because again, I don't know if that became clear, Archer has the rights to the first 19. So we publish those books ourselves completely. And then there's the New York publisher who does everything since then, up to books number 33. So we would market the books we had rights to, but there was a lot of overlap. And so we switched over to something called Ingram, which does national distribution and also print on demand, which is another thing that changed. So there's been a lot of change in publishing, because it used to be that self-published was sort of looked upon with some scorn, and you'd go to a machine in a store perhaps, and it didn't look great. And now it's quite acceptable. So there are ways that we go through Ingram, and they print on demand. So we don't have to worry about printing 5,000 books and insuring them and shipping them and having them in a warehouse somewhere. So now they just get sent out, which gives us a more national footprint, which is really good. And if there's anything I'm talking about that you want to know more about, just, feel free to interrupt. In terms of publicity, though, that to me has been a bear, because you have to constantly promote the books. And again, I expected the publisher for the newer books was going to do a lot more. So we have tried almost everything. We got into more and more audiobooks. We do that. We have events with bookstores, which Archer has always done. And then we have events at libraries. I mentioned Facebook, keep trying to populate that, and Instagram. We send out an e-newsletter. At every event, I gather people's email addresses. So we have a mailing list of people. So I try to keep people up to date on what he's doing and when the new book is coming out. Keep the website populated also when new events are coming. So there's a lot that we try to do. We had a thing with the state of Vermont. We had boxes and boxes of books. And so we created a thing with Vermont Tourism and the Welcome Centers. You could have a free book. It was like a library of Archer. And please just return it to any of the Welcome Centers. So a lot of people discovered Archer that way. The best thing that Archer has told me that really has spiked the sales was a television coverage. So it was Sunday Morning was one of them. Terry Gross was another. There was there was something. There are things like that. Of course, will just escalate everything quite nicely. We had events with other authors. I thought that kind of dialogue would be good. We created an event in Philadelphia with a woman who was a politician and an attorney, and because one of the books was placed in Philadelphia. So in every area, we tried to do something relevant to where he was. So there's just, as you can hear, there have been years and years of effort on getting new people to know about the books, because there's this wonderfully devoted cadre of people in New England. But how do you get somebody in Arkansas or in California? So it used to be book events, but they're expensive. And for Archer to fly all over the US is hard to do and expensive. And if people don't know him there, how do they get to know him there? So that's your challenge. So going back to being a new writer, though, recently someone came to us and said that he'd written a book and he was a policeman, and could we give him some feedback? So Archer and I both did, and we felt there were some things he could do. And he then asked what he should do. And Archer gave him wonderful advice. He said, you can try to get an agent, or you can self-publish, and gave him the avenues. Well, he wrote to 30 agents, he told us, about his book, which we felt, in all fairness, was good, but needed some more work, which he didn't want to do. He wrote to 30 different agents, and he said 2 of them wrote back and said no. So he then self-published, but then he hit that same wall I'm talking about, which is, now what? You have a book, maybe you printed 100 of them. What do you do with it? And that's where he's stuck. You can go to bookstores and say, hey, would you sell my book for me? Or you can put it on Ingram, but how do you get that word out? And that's the dilemma. That's the real dilemma. The other thing, I noticed that you distributed a whole list of bookstores in Vermont. And that's what a lot of people do. They go knock on the door and they say, I have this great book about how to grow apple trees. And some bookstores may say, all right, I'll take 2 and I'll on consignment. And if they sell, I'll let you know. But most bookstores don't want to get into that labor because it's hard. It's a lot of interaction. So it's a challenge. And I can't say it's gotten easier. I'd love to be wildly optimistic and give you a magic answer, but it's very, very hard and constant. And I can't afford to do advertising, not that I'm convinced that works, but we get a lot of requests for ads. You know, the college where Archer went to school, they'll say, oh, you know, would you run an ad? Well, an ad this big by this big is $600. And as Archer wisely and frugally and Vermontally points out, how many books do you have to sell to make back $600, right? There's another factor, and then I'll see what you want to hear about, which is in the old days when I started in advertising, you'd run an ad and it would say, okay, if you want to buy this, write to Department 6. And then I could say, oh, they saw the ad in Time magazine, or they saw the ad here. Now, I don't know where people come from or if things work. If they take a free book from one of the welcome centers, they read it, they drop it off somewhere else, right? Do I know if they ever bought a book or not? No, I don't know. So unless there's a spike of thousands of books being sold, I have no idea what has worked. I send out a newsletter. It's very chatty. It shows the cat. It talks about Archer's motorcycle, all this great stuff. People love it. Does it make anybody buy a book? I don't know. So that's another challenge that we face all the time. So I hope I've made it really daunting. I hope I haven't actually, but tell me what you would like to know about, or questions for Archer. I think that's probably the best thing. I think I've covered most of the stuff.
Well, before we all start on this dialogue stuff, I'd like to monopolize things because I'm the bottom of 6 kids and I'm getting my revenge back. I would disagree with Margot, as I have over time. That's part of what makes the creative energy work between us. But the more I've looked at my old-fashioned approach and her newfangled approach, and the parts where it has absolutely worked and parts where it hasn't particularly worked, I think in retrospect, my response would be most of and thank you for getting these guys to tell us a little bit of who they were and what they were, but for the most part, we're talking newcomers who are cutting their teeth and therefore are local just because nobody knows who you are. I think you should turn that into an asset. That's exactly what I did. Now, of course, I was writing about Vermont, so that's a locale, but in a funny kind of way, William Faulkner wrote about a locale, for God's sake. Everybody writes about some place. So if you start by exploiting that, it might be to your advantage because you can reach it. So, oh yes, all right. I started before the internet and computers and all the rest, but I think the technique still applies. Get hold of the local newspapers, get hold of the local radios are key. Because they're very hungry, they're on 24/7, and they give you more time. They like people who talk and respond to questions. Newspapers will give you reviews. Review is free advertising, and that, to me, is the trick. Get other people to do your work for you, and if there is work to be done, do it yourself. Get into your cars, carve out some time. Get rid of your children, stop doing all the laundry, never paint your house again, get in that car and hustle. And you go to all the bookstores and just to be nice, learn who they are, learn who their kids are, learn their personal history so that when things come up, you pick up the phone or you send them an email and they go, gosh, you're a nice guy. You remember who I am. Instead of giving them shelf talkers or the other. In other words, if you've been given advice of how to do this, do something different than the advice you've been given, because that's what everybody else is doing. You need to stand out as an individual who happens to write books. And as I pointed out earlier, then try to get the reviews and try to get the publicity. But as Margot was pointing out, don't pay for that stuff.
can't.
What you're trying to get is the free publicity, and the free publicity is going to be your moving mouth and or other people reviewing your books. And the people who are going to review your books are going to be locals who are hungry for stuff. Don't worry about Terry Gross. No one's going to reach Terry Gross. I mean, I'm quote unquote a big cheese. I've never reached Terry Gross, and I don't
Sorry, I
stand a
forgot
chance in
him.
hell of doing it. So don't waste your time doing that.
But
Go
it
after the
sounds-
achievable.
It sounds like a lot of you are pre-book, really. So are your questions about how to get a book published? What would you like to know? It's not, I mean, we're talking about how to promote it, but do you want to know before that what to do? How can we be of help?
And those of you who want to speak, just jump in and we'll sort of sort it out.
I'd like to know more about the Ingram print on demand option you described and what
Okay.
they do for you and what they don't do for you.
It was suggested to us because the New York publisher, who's been fabulous at working hand in glove with us, said, look, there's a bookstore and you want to make it as easy for them to place an order. So if they go to Ingram and they see books 20 through 30 they listed there, they're going to go, oh, thank you, I'll take that. She said, but if you put all your books there as well, they can see books 1 through 32, right? So that was one really good advantage for us, because my belief was that way we get the books in Topeka, the bookstores in Topeka. The other advantage was, as I mentioned, we didn't have to do a very expensive printing of 4,000 books and get them shipped from Tennessee to New Hampshire, where the warehouse and distribution person was. And then she would have to fulfill every order. So it made that all easier. And again, it was because the quality of print on demand is now very high level. So that worked out to be financially good as well. The disadvantages, they take a lot more money per book than we used to. That's the disadvantage. And I optimistically had hoped that would offset, which it does on some books and doesn't on others. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, when you say take a lot more money, is it upfront money per book or is it per book sold, or how, how do they take their money?
They, no, it's not upfront. It's not upfront at all. It's per book, and it's sale, and it's a percentage, and it's shipping, and yes, all that.
But keep in mind one crucial aspect, and it goes to the old saw that you write for yourself, you don't write for money. If you're thinking about writing for money, start betting on horses, because it's going to be a lot quicker return, and you're going to get your learning curve a lot faster than wasting your time a year at a time writing a book that's not going to get anywhere according to your expectations. If you write for yourself, if you write for your soul, if you write because you got a story that you absolutely need to get out, great. If you think you're going to be Stephen King, then you're an idiot, and stop doing that. Okay. If there was a beach big enough to hold the bodies of all those writers who went, well, geez, you can do it, I can do it, only I'll be a millionaire and you're just a loser. It's an idiotic way to pursue something. There are certain ways to make money, and the first is get a job. The last way to make money is to write a book. That having been said, therefore, don't be foolish with the little money that you've got in your pocket. And so, yeah, print on demand, things like that. Always look at the margin. Always look at, as Margot was pointing out, the way I look at these things, and that is, okay, if I put out $10, how many books does that mean I need to sell? Now, obviously, there's a little bit of lost leader stuff involved in that, but you got to be very careful, and your expectations have got to be realistic. And that's why I'm always recommending to use the shoe leather. The one disposable income you have is your time. and so go to those places that I already rattled off. Now, just to divert ever so slightly, because I don't want to forget those couple of things that had to do with police procedurals, because technically I'm on non-Northeast Kingdom-ite that I am because of the murder mystery thing, and I obviously don't want to lose sight of that. But be careful, because the murder mystery thing can be a little bit fraudulent. I don't actually regard myself as a murder mystery writer. I regard myself as a novelist. But Romeo and Juliet has more dead bodies than you can wave a stick at. Is that a murder mystery? No, it's not regarded as such. People kill each other all the time. I make a lot of money standing over corpses because people kill each other all the time. They kill themselves all the time by eating poorly, but that's a different subject. The point being that murder mysteries are just a form of novel. Yeah. And just like any other novel that you would write, you need to go out there and research. If I find someone who's spending most of their writing time in a room like this, looking out of a window like that, and with the stuffed cat behind me, purring gently in the background, I'm inclined to tell them, get the hell out of there and meet people, learn how people do stuff. One of you is a lawyer, and then you all have professions. Soak those professions. They say, write what you know. Well, yeah, kind of. That's not a bad idea. I've been all these things that were rattled off at the top of the hour. Go into more and go into those, and obviously you did them because you were enthusiastic about them. Share that enthusiasm with the reader, and that'll sustain you through the writing process, which took an inordinately long period of time. As well it should, because you are honing and crafting something of which you should be proud. And you're not going to be proud of it if you dash through it. So take your time, and it takes a lot of time. And therefore, you better write about something you really love and about which you're very interested.
One thing Archer mentioned early on, if you get to a point where you want to have readers to sort of give you feedback about your book, I had not realized that when Archer and I got together. And not only does he have people who are editorially oriented or proofreading kind of oriented, but he has these specialists. So if Archer is going to write about an artificial knee that shows up, he will run all his work by an orthopedic surgeon to get the verification that he's doing it right. He has cops, he has people who are, what are your other specialties?
You name it.
Yeah.
Depending on the book, I get
Yeah.
lawyers, Indian chiefs, judges, mechanics. I'll get a Maytag repairman if someone decides to wash a corpse in a washing machine. I better find out which is the best brand to do that with. So that kind of stuff. And the nice thing is, it gets you out of the house. It gets you to meet interesting people. And you should always research 200 to 300 to 400% more than you'll need in the book, because that'll give you flexibility when the writing time comes.
And he gets to eat a lot of junk food. So he goes to Philadelphia and eats hoagies and cheesesteaks and soft pretzels.
Yeah, this is in her wildest dream. I just go to Sunoco's and eat the same crap in those gas stations that they serve up here. She likes to eat. I don't like to eat it.
So it sort of adds to the texture and the reality of the book. If you talk about like a cabinet in Rhode Island, which is a milkshake. So it just adds a little local flavor, but he went to Chicago for a week to learn about artificial knees and the whole medical procedure. And it gives realism, and it's true. Even.
Well, you want to pass along your fun. A lot of people don't do research. They just look it up on Google or whatever, Wikipedia. And that's fine. You can do that. But But did you have fun doing that, or were you just trying to get a product turned out? I'm old school. I'm like a journalist. Several of you guys were journalists. I was a journalist in the old days, in my salad years. Yeah, I got a kick out of that. I like getting out. I like getting into other people's business. I still do as a medical examiner. You know, that's how I get into people's houses. 3 hours ago, I was in someone's house and I was able to poke through every bloody room and closet and drawer in his house. He wasn't protesting, and I came away enriched with how a guy like that with his background lived the way he lived. I park that away. You know, he's a future character or not, but at least I've enriched my brain with that kind of data.
I have a couple questions
Protesting because he was dead?
because he was dead.
That he didn't complain.
No, I'm curious. You were a medical, so you work as a medical examiner.
I'm a death investigator for the medical examiner's office. I'm the guys in years of the office. I don't cut them open. I send them up to be cut open.
Right. So I'm curious if you went into a house and you got to look everywhere and there was no protest because he wasn't able to protest.
Well, that's why I'm there. He's dead. I'm not. And part of my job is to find out what made him dead. And it's therefore my job to go through his house and find out where is that smoking gun, if it exists.
Do you have a police background?
I happen to have a police background, but I'm almost unique in that capacity. We are called medico-legal death investigators, not cops. I happen to have been a cop who specialized in sex crimes against kids. But that's a very unusual background for a death investigator. But it also makes working with cops much easier because they all know me. I know generations of them at this point, and they all know, and they can trust me. So I have some cops at these death scenes that literally just fade into the background. They say, look, you know what I do, and you know what you're supposed to be doing. Just do it all. And I'm going to be playing with my cell phone here, and I let them do that.
Let me clarify two things. First of all, he doesn't snoop into people's closets just for the hell of it. Okay, he's not a.
No, it's my job.
That's the.
I'm not suggesting that.
So I know you were, but I want to clarify it.
She's much more paranoid than I.
The other part I want to clarify is that Archer is very careful to never trespass the privacy of anybody. So he may take the feel of something and part of a look of something else and incorporate it in a book, but he would never take a wholesale situation and put it in a book because he is a man of integrity beyond belief.
Well, it's privacy.
Yes,
It's just simple decency. So if I do
Correct.
find something I find really interesting, I change the setting, I change the name, I change the gender, I change the circumstances. But the nut of what I learned and what I want to exploit in the book, that's thriving. That's
I have some questions. First of all, is there, when you talk about Ingram's, is there any Vermont alternative to going to Ingram's these days? With all the people who are doing self-publishing and all the print-on-demand publishers, it's still Ingram as far as you're concerned. That's the only way to go.
Monopoly.
Yeah, the alternative is going back, and believe me, we try to constantly find ways to survive in this.
Mhm.
No, there aren't. The
Okay,
do it would be go back, maybe print on demand, but I'd have to send them out.
To your point, what do you want your market to be? If you've written 50 ways to tap a tree, then your market's pretty limited, perhaps.
Mhm.
And therefore, you could almost go door to door to your entire clientele. Don't go to Ingram. Absolutely keep it in Vermont. Saturate your local bookstores because you've got a very localized product. I don't.
Mhm.
Okay, these are nationally appealing detective books. So they're not 50 ways to tap a tree, but there are a lot of people who write books that are absolutely local, in which case they'd be foolish to lose the potential profit margin by going to Ingram's, which is going to try to fleece you for every penny they possibly can. Keep in mind one thing. all the people, all the entities, all the things that we've mentioned, the stores, you name it. If they are in business, they are guaranteed to be paid. Okay, the publishers are guaranteed to be paid. The bookstores are guaranteed to be paid because they get a cut. Everybody gets a cut. There is the presumption in this business is there one single entity that is not presumed to necessarily make any money at all. That's the writer.
Yeah. So that answers that, because certainly more and more people are looking at trying to do print on demand, so they don't have to deal with the warehousing and the distribution, which is so poorly done these days by most publishers.
Mm.
But so that's interesting, because some of our other writers who've spoken about their printing or their publishing experience definitely recommend going through Vermont-based small publishing houses and doing this sort of middle road of paying for some of the costs, but then having them do at least some of the work, some of the distributing, some of the warehousing, the print on demand, that kind of thing, as the alternative to giving up basically all your income to Ingram. Yeah. So I have a couple of other quick questions, though. I want to know, do you still do the business of offering named characters through nonprofits?
I used to. I'm in transition at the moment, so let me be euphemistic on that. But up until my last book, yes, that's exactly what I was doing. But I'm in a period of transition right now. Yeah, and that was no more than just fun. That didn't do, in terms of the business of writing, that was utterly immaterial. It was just, someone once said, can you give me a hardback book because I want to support the the three-legged bent-eared puppy society, and would you give me a book for our auction? And I said, well, you're not going to make any money doing that. Well, why don't we auction off a Joe Gunther character in the next book, a character name that I can do anything I want with, including change their sex or turn them into monsters or kill them on page 1.
I know, that's what you did with me.
Yeah. Did I kill you?
No, but you had me throw a kitten up against a wall.
Oh,
And
see?
some of my friends never forgot it.
Oh, there you go.
Actually,
See?
now
Buyer
I'm going
beware.
to interject and correct Archer. I disagree, because yes, some of the situations, it was very charming, and like there's a group in New Hampshire that has a children's center. Visibility is probably 100 people, but New Hampshire Public Television, New Hampshire Public Radio, I get visibility. I send them books, I send them posters. I get visibility for him as an author as being an auction offering.
Yes.
So that was my motivation.
Well, that's what I was thinking, that the Preservation Trust, and I think it was the Brattleboro Museum,
Yes.
they with their publicity, they reach thousands of people.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's,
And even if the people didn't bid on the item, they certainly noticed. And
Yes.
they certainly noticed that, they subconsciously at least registered the idea that you were, supportive of their organization, which they were supportive of. It just
yes,
seems that would be a way, especially if you're not, if you are a local writer, if you're trying to at least start fairly locally, to do that sort of thing can get you thousands of people in a fairly
well,
short order.
No,
Yeah.
because you see, there is a tendency to simplify this stuff too much.
no,
I was a quote unquote big cheese. That's why they approached me. That's why this worked. If you're a beginner and you go and you say, hey, I'll put a character, they're going to say, we don't even know who you are.
Mhm.
They wanted a piece of me. I'm used to that.
right.
People want a piece of me. Well, that's fine. That's how those negotiations take place. But
Yeah.
if you're just
Exactly.
starting and you've never written a book before and you make exactly the same suggestion that I made, they're going to go,
So what?
who would auction who would want to be a character in a book by a guy who's never written a book before? There's no
Right.
sex appeal to that.
No, no, I see what you, I agree with you, and I think that you don't have to necessarily be a big cheese, but you have to be a known cheese.
Yes.
And after all, there are a lot of people,
Yeah,
was
because
a
you're not gonna be a
bet, so-
local cheese, but you gotta
Local
have
cheese.
some sort
Yeah,
of
that
coattails.
right,
was
you got,
that
right, right.
Montpelier, at a library some years ago, and one woman had driven from Ohio to get there so she could bid on getting her name in his book.
Right,
So you need that cachet of, this is something I really want. And also, as the money goes up, they want to have him back again the next year and the next year. But no, it
but I
just,
think some of that is paying off because you've turned up at local bookstores too. I mean, at some point, you were not a well-known author, but
No,
you turned up at all the local bookstores.
The bookstores, I think that's a totally different thing. You show up, if you're a beginning writer, offer to talk to crew and learn how to talk to people, be funny,
Yeah.
be engaging, be self-deprecating, be, grab hold of them, talk with them, do the Q&A. Don't read your novel. They don't care
No.
about that. They'll buy your novel if they like you. But get one of these bookstores, try to get into talking gigs, and make yourself the most memorable part of their week.
Right.
You know,
But eventually that can then turn into becoming somebody wanting to be in one of your books or something like
Correct.
that.
exactly.
It's all,
It's
it becomes, I mean, okay, so I don't know if this is really relevant to this whole session, but you're one of the, you are, several authors, are nationally known and sell their books outside of New England. But what if you are a Vermont-based author in general, are you going to generally look to Northern New England for your audience? Or would you recommend that almost every author that you might ever talk to, especially an aspiring author, really just try to stay local? Or would you recommend that
you don't try to
think
stay
big and then
local. You
settle?
start local. You start local because that's where your power base is, and that's how far your car will drive. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
We all aspire to be read by Martians and Saturnians, okay? Because we'd love everyone to read our stuff beyond our mothers. Okay, well, but how are you going to get there?
Mhm.
Start local.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really saying. And in a funny kind of way, Margot and I have negotiated, and before Margot, with my publishers, they'd say, well, we're going to put you on an author tour and we're going to send you to Colorado and we're going to send you to California and all that. And I said, nobody knows who the hell I am in Colorado or California. Why don't you send me to Boston? Hello.
Right.
yeah, you just push a little, you push your,
Yes.
yeah.
Right.
And also it helps that Archer's books take place in part in Gloucester and Boston and in
Yeah.
Chicago and Philadelphia. So that's how I can get events there by saying, look, this book and this book took place in Maine. And they go, oh, so then the Maine library wants it. So that was
It's not a bad idea. When you write your books, by the way, to you burgeoning writers, think about that. Think about putting just a chapter in a city with a lot of people. People like reading about themselves.
Yeah.
So are you doing that on purpose?
Sure. You got to be motivated by curiosity, but if you're not motivated by trying to make a living, then why the hell are you doing this? In my case.
Mhm.
A lot of other people are writing because they need to get the demons out of their head. I got demons aplenty. So I'm piling on the advantages of doing this, and I got away with it. I got lucky. But I would suggest what I just said as the real approach to this that's going to work best for you.
Archer, earlier, Whitney, who is the lawyer, asked about editing. When is it done?
Yes, I didn't want to forget those questions, but of course I forgot the substance of the question. I didn't forget that they were asked, whatever they were. So yes, the editing question. When you find that your beginning to edit things like the green car and you go, nah, it's a red car. When you realize you're doing that, stop. Because now you're just fiddling around. You're not letting go of the manuscript so that the next guy in line can say, well, this is a terrible manuscript. You need to rewrite it. That's part of the fears that we have as burgeoning writers, is that somebody other than our mother who says, that's very nice, dear, is going to say, this is not very nice at all. This is a terrible book. But it's fixable. Just try considering changing this, that, and the other. Before, it was in our control. It was our perfect newborn baby. Then it becomes everybody's property, and that hurts. But it only hurts if you make it hurt. This should be a learning curve, and all criticism should be constructive. It always used to drive me crazy when someone say, oh, this is a perfect book. There's no such thing as a perfect book. I want to listen to your opinions. It's my right to dispose of those opinions and say they're idiots. But every once in a while, in fact, remarkably frequently, those opinions are going to hold water, and they're going to make me edit my book and turn out a better product in the tail end. So you need to let go of your own editing at a certain time, but not prematurely also. So yes, if you're changing red to blue, then stop. But there is, I tell you what, my approach was, when people say, oh, how do you write a book? I just say, write a bad book. It doesn't matter. Just write the goddamn thing. Give yourself a middle, a beginning, and the end. Put clay on the table with which you can make a statue. If you don't have any clay, you're not going to have a statue. So put the lump of clay on the table. Is it a good looking lump? No. That's what editing is. That's what rewriting is. That's what going out to trusted readers results in. And you polish and you smooth out and you do all that stuff. After a while, you feel like you've reached that spot, and that's subjective. That's going to be hard for me to tell you exactly when it is that you've reached that point. But the back and forth, other people's opinions, that's why, as Margot pointed out, you want to find people you trust, and you want to find more than one. And they've got to be honest. They've got to be brutal, but not just brutal for brutality's sake. In other words, they got to have skin in the game. They got to care for you in a constructive way, and not in a blindly supportive way. These have got to be blunt and honest and trusted people. These are people whose libraries are much like your libraries. So that means that their subjective love of language and their taste buds in books are similar to yours. If I wrote American mystery stories and I went to an Arabic scholar and asked him to be a reader, I'm probably not going to get very good feedback. So all of those echoes that result from your giving the manuscript to other people to read, even if it's in its relatively raw shape, that's how you edit a book. Book writing is presumed to be a solitary craft. It's not.
Well, it is to start, but
but
like I was
obviously
saying about
write it
this,
alone in your room. But
Yeah.
book writing is done. For example, when you read a book, you're reading a book that someone wrote. That makes it a collaborative exercise. As a reader, you're a storyteller. As a writer, you're a storyteller. The pleasure in the book is the commingling of a reader and a writer. It's always been a collaborative effort. For every writing, there's got to be a reader. So understand that and realize that this is an interactive art form. Sorry.
No, I was thinking back to the young cop that I was mentioning earlier, and there is this thing of holding on to the integrity of what you have created. And that's a hard balance. And I'll say something to Archer sometime about, I think you went on too long about this guy, and he needs to have a sense himself of where that line is. And with this young cop, I know he was struggling with that when I said, look, I don't care enough about this character. I want to know more. Why is she this way? Why is she being so foolish about this? but because he had pride of creative authorship, he was holding on. He didn't want to erode what he had created. And that became difficult for him. And to us, ultimately, he ended up with a book that was not that interesting. But it's a fine balance, I guess, is what I'm.
Yeah.
You're a good critic, Margot. Were there other questions that I have forgotten to re-ask? Anybody want to ask something else?
There was another question that went with the editing question, but that I forget.
I did too.
Who was it who asked me a question early on, and I said I can see your face, but there's no name on your face.
Whitney in the middle?
Whitney? No.
No,
Who's Whitney?
in the middle in the white.
No,
That's me, but you did answer my question.
yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
I did. No, there's someone who's sitting with almost like a God's eye and books.
Marianne.
She's in the corner.
Oh.
Yes, you
Yes.
just moved. Yes,
Yes.
you had a question.
God's eye. Oh, it's a rug.
Oh, it's a dark
It's
blur in
very
my
dark,
picture.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just turned my light on. I don't remember my question. I am curious about how how Vermont becomes relevant to other states. Is it sufficiently universal or is it
Oh,
hyper local?
It's just sexy.
Vermont?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why?
Bernie Sanders, I don't care, whatever. No, maple syrup, cows, people come to Vermont. People don't go to Iowa. Okay, I mean,
Vermont is a
in other words,
brand.
you
Well, I guess I'm curious. Okay, I mean, I was raised here, but I was born in Ohio. And why does nobody write about Ohio? I mean, half of the country's from Ohio.
Ohio does not have Vermont's cachet. If you go out
Absolutely.
into the wastelands of wherever and you say Vermont, they're going to go, oh, Vermont, right? Cows, leaves, snow.
Bernie.
skiing."
I had a Texas motorcycle cop once say to me, Vermont, where's that at? So not
okay.
everybody knows where, but that was a long time
I used
ago.
to live in Texas, so
Yeah,
I
but
am.
he was in Texas, that's why.
And he was a cop.
There's-
It was a bad date. We won't talk about that. No, I am. So do you find that Vermont is a good, I hate to say the word brand, but it works.
No, well, okay, Vermont is appealing for any number of reasons. Yes, whether you know this or not, Vermont has a high recognition factor. A lot of people know our two senators a hell of a lot more readily than they know the senators from, dare I say, Ohio. It just because
Not if it's going to be JD Vance, but yes, I know, I see your point.
you get the point. Bernie Sanders ran for president. Bernie Sanders has a mouth that won't quit. Bernie Sanders didn't even come from Vermont, and he's associated with Vermont. That's all I'm saying here. Is that
Right.
you can go away from politicians and talk about maple syrup, whatever. It's a brand, as Margot was saying. But the other interesting thing about Vermont, and the reason I wrote about Vermont, other than the fact that I live here, is I joke and say there are only 25 people in Vermont. And that makes it, if you're a writer like I am, who is research, savvy, one of them is the governor of the state, and the 25th one is the guy who lives under the bridge. Okay, so the fact that all of them are reachable. I mean, it's not a big stretch that any one of us can pick up the phone and call the governor of the state of Vermont. He might even pick up his own phone. That's not going to happen in California,
But
but
that's
it might
not
well
why it
happen in
makes it
Vermont. No,
brand.
but the
No.
point of the
No.
exercise is that therefore everybody's reachable and everybody can be spoken with and everybody's brain can be picked to write the kinds of books that I write. California has got millions of people in it, and it therefore becomes more difficult to write my kind of book in California than it is in Vermont, where I can actually talk about governors of the state of Vermont. Why? Because I can interview them. In Vermont, in California, they're going to be surrounded by security people, and I'm not going to be able to reach them.
But does that limit your appeal? Does a book about Vermont sell in Iowa?
Well, who knows? I mean, that gets to a far more slippery slope as to why does a book sell?
Yeah.
It's not that his
Yeah.
books are
Know
about
that, do we?
whether the characters are um, interesting or compelling. Is the story compelling? It's not just Vermont. Like when we talk about a regional writer, like I used to read Tony Hillerman. They were all
Yeah.
placed in the Southwest.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. There were elements that came in about the Southwest and the culture and the Native American ways and all that. But the ultimate draw was the story and the characters.
Yeah.
And the quality of writing.
And as Bob pointed out earlier, dumb luck. I mean, that's the other crazy part is that you're going to get another writer in another state writing about Native American Indians in Washington State, let's say,
Yeah.
and you'll never have heard of him.
No.
And his books might even be better written than
Yeah.
Tony Hillerman's. Why? Who knows?
But
If you
there's
had an answer to that, you could guarantee a bestseller. Nobody can guarantee a bestseller.
No, I know, but there is a sort of, if I can say that, there's a universality about the police experience in your novels. I mean, in other words, what happens in Brattleboro or Montpelier or something in one of your novels could happen in New Hampshire or Boston or upstate New York, or, I mean, there might be a rural element to it, but at the same time, they're fairly universal.
Sure.
You
And
know,
therefore accessible to the reader.
yeah, I mean, they're inaccessible to a reader in any state, really. I mean,
Yeah.
so they're not, I mean, they take place in Vermont, but I don't know what makes a Vermont novel, honestly.
I mean, again, but to your point, here's the funny thing is what you're saying is, okay, there's a universality of appeal. And yet Tony Hillerman wrote about Southwestern, native shamans and God knows what. That's pretty esoteric stuff. I don't know about you, but I don't diddly about that. And they certainly don't cover the earth in Vermont. And yet he's a multimillionaire bestseller, except he's dead. And I'm not. Well, I'm alive.
I was gonna say you're alive. Last we checked. No, you're right. I mean, yeah, no, I hear you.
That's the dumb
So
luck.
what portion of your books are sold in Vermont? What percentage? Do you know that?
No, nobody knows that because you go to the publisher to find out the accuracy of sales. The publishers actually don't know because that's not how publishing works. Publishers distribute books to warehouses. They don't actually
hubs,
they don't
and they
actually
go out.
know where the books end up and the passage back and forth of returns and whatnot. Publishers are by and large idiots the way they run their business. Anybody else would go out of business if they ran things like booksellers do. But bookselling goes back to pre-Dickens, and the template is largely the same. And as a result, if they weren't owned by national corporations, they'd all be out of business. It's a ridiculous business.
But many of them you are publishing, so you would know where they go.
Well, I would at my level of operations. Yeah, Margot could crunch those numbers to you, but
Yeah.
that's because those books were being thrown out and I therefore reacquired them. So that's not the prow of my ship of state. That's just, those are just lifeboats that I gathered to put back on board when they were being thrown away.
Can I ask a completely irrelevant question, which is, who are your favorite writers? Who's inspired you over time?
Anybody and everybody, but they're not murder mystery.
That's why I'm asking. I'm curious who.
I read history books. I read 900-page dozers that Margot can't even imagine how I lug them around. And there are too many a number. I'm a promiscuous reader. I'm always reading.
Yeah.
And I can rattle off a list of names, but then I just curse myself for having forgotten twice as many names, some of which are my favorites. So there are readers, but it's got to be the tone and language. Like, I don't know, Max Hastings, the British historian.
Yeah.
He's got an extraordinary verve. He's very honest in his writing, and he doesn't mind sticking an oar in the water if he has an opinion. I like that.
Yeah.
because I'm smart enough to be able to say, well, that's your opinion and I think you're wrong. But he does it in such an engaging, lively way. Whereas the old Perry Miller, long dead historian on colonial America, holy smokes! I mean, drown me in drying paint. The guy was so boring. Brilliant. There was nothing he didn't know about colonial America, and I didn't want to hear any of it.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I'm always curious because, we get our inspiration from a vast array of places, but
Yeah, with me, it's more the tone. I like fast moving, engaging, respectful, alive, interested writers. I'll take a Doris Kearns Goodwin or Atkinson's type guys writing history books than I will the pure, true academics. Funnily enough, a lot of the better writers have a journalistic background.
yeah,
They know how to hit deadlines. They know how to move quickly. They know how to, they put the hook at the very beginning of the book and they keep you moving. Because if they don't, they're going to miss their deadline. They're going to get fired. Like that, or retire on the job, historian, scholar, everything bought and paid for, tenured professor. Chances are that's not going to be a very fast written, engaging book.
right. No, that's true. You went from journalism to fiction, right? I mean, you had a lot of other, sounds like you've had a lot of other jobs too. What did you find to be your biggest hurdles going from one medium to the other? Because it's hard. They're very different forms of.
They are very different. The other thing, the most important transition from journalism to novel writing was slow down. You're actually not on deadline. You don't need to contain, make it fit 30 inches. And you got to realize that, in fact, you should be writing 30 pages before you even realize you shot your cuffs. Slow down, be rich, share the experience with the reader. You're not just giving the facts, ma'am, and it's not all punch, punch, punch. There's a far greater, more gradual and more elegant seduction process in novel writing than there is in journalism.
Yeah,
That's a tough learning.
it is very hard,
Yeah.
especially the facts get in the way.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, this has to be accurate. This has to be true. This has to be factual. Well, no, I
Right.
mean,
And to Margot's point, you need to get into the feelings and you need to get into, what people are thinking, because your readers are doing that. They're into the feelings. They're doing some thinking. So you need to have your characters parallel their personalities. I mean, they're creative. They're storytellers. They want to read the story as if they were telling it themselves. And if you're just doing staccato facts, hell, they're going to the newspaper for that. They want to have a good time. They want to sit around the fire and roast weenies with you. Gradual process.
Gradual process.
Joseph, Whitney, any questions as we wind down? Comments?
Good.
Okay,
Wonderful.
thank you so
Great.
much.
If you have any questions after this, feel free to get in touch with us and ask anything specific or general.
Okay. Will do.
Thank you for this opportunity.
It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
very generous of you.
Oh, you bet.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, since we all got to say something at the end, we all get to say bye. Normally it's like, see you, mystery people.
Right.
Thank you, St. Johnsbury Athenaeum, for doing this.
Our pleasure, and thanks to Margot and Archer and for
Yes.
Chris for setting up this series. And Whitney, great to see you. I will just say Whitney used to work here. So
Ah,
she's an old friend and a fun person to see. So thank you very much, Joseph. Nice to meet you. And Ellen, the same. So on that
Likewise.
happy note,
and Ellen, you're from the Free Press, weren't you?
Oh my God. 50 years ago.
I recognized you. Yeah.
Oy, oy, oy.
Oh, yeah,
That was my
yeah,
first job. Yep.
yeah.
We could talk.
No, it was my husband who worked there,
Ooh.
Phil Mayers.
Oh, my God, of course.
Yeah,
I know Bill.
you know, Bill.
All right.
Thank you, Archer. Thank
Thank
you. And I hope we'll see you in person starting this year.
Yeah, who
That'd
knows?
be nice.
Woohoo.
Okay.
Best of luck, everybody.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Keep
Good
writing.
night, everyone.
Well.